But today's word is understanding. And so it's also the 4th of July. And so we say that like the 4th of July, and it takes away our understanding of the day sometimes. So sometimes we'll say 9/11 or the Day of Infamy or, and so I wanted us to take a little bit of time today to understand a few words, not just one word, because there are a lot of words that we conflate, that we put together, and sometimes we use those words and we think we know what they mean, but what they mean to you may not be what they mean to me, may not be what they mean to Ray or to Susan, and so I want to talk about these words. And I want to talk about it with the example of this particular song. Before I do that, though, I wanted to just slightly mention that some of those things that, like Susan mentioned, the psalmist said the word liberty. All right. Well, he didn't actually say the word liberty. He was translated in the King James Version as saying liberty. And we use the words independence and freedom and liberty, and we'll use it a lot today. People will be using those words. Now, we won't necessarily be thinking about it. Very often we just use the words because we just assume we know what they mean. It's a very famous writer. He's so famous I can't remember his name right now. But he wrote this brilliant book where he took the United States and divided it up into 11 different countries. And he said that each of us have a different country that we live in, and the culture of that country teaches us what words mean differently. And so the example that he used was in the South, they say, and in the East, they say liberty. And we up here in the North, we say freedom. All right? Now, in his thesis, in his idea, the North country up here was settled by Protestants, Germans, Dutch, the Lutherans, and the Dutch Reformed here in Michigan. And the Protestant Revolution saw freedom as a natural state, a right that all of us had. But in the southern states, they used the word liberty. And liberty was something that was granted to you. Not everybody was at liberty. And so you might have heard, give me liberty or give me death. And so I've heard that said, give me freedom or give me death. We sometimes talk about today as the Independence Day. And we don't often recite the story about what it was that prompted this particular day, but it was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And so we tend to think of this as we're free today, in many of the same ways that we just celebrated for the very first time as a national or federal holiday, Juneteenth. We talk about that as the Independence Day of the slaves. But when we look at those two particular instances, we see that independence simply meant independence from King George. And the guys who signed that very famous proclamation that said, because King George was such a horrible person and he was going to tax us without representation, we had this feeling that we needed to declare our independence from him. Now, independence in 1776 meant something different than what we might think of it as today. So you recall that many of these same men went on to write the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And as we started to look at and understand their understanding of that word independence, they meant independent from monarchy. They meant not dependent on England. They did not mean independence the way many of us think about it today, like we're free. In fact, they said that not everybody's free, that their definition of independence, their understanding of independence, was strictly to landed white gentry. In other words, you had to own land, you had to be white, and you had to be genteel. So you couldn't just be a farmer. You had to be a gentleman farmer. You had to not get your hands dirty. You had to be so rich that your hands did not get dirty. If you had to till the soil by yourself, it didn't matter if you owned 40 acres. You were not a gentleman. A gentleman does not get his hands dirty. He's independent. Well, not really, because the reason he doesn't get his hands dirty, and this is true for most of the guys who signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, is that they owned slaves. Many of our greatest founding fathers were slave owners, even the ones that were for abolition and against slavery. So Hamilton was against slavery, but he sold and bought slaves and owned slaves. George Washington owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Ben Franklin owned slaves. Only John Adams was a dedicated abolitionist and did not own slaves. And as a Supreme Court justice, after he was president, he was a Supreme Court justice, he wrote prolifically about the differences between freedom and independence and liberty. And it was very obvious at the time that those three words were not interchangeable. That governments grant us liberty, that monarchs grant us liberty, that our station in life grants us liberty. And not everybody has that. So what does that have to do with this song? So if you listen to the song, I've entitled this, Freedom's Just Another Word. Many people have sung this song. Most of you probably know this song as a blues song sung by Janis Joplin. And I'll tell you that before Janis sang it, there was half a dozen people who not only sang this song and recorded this song, but they had hits with it. So this was already a known and popular song. And so the first person that actually recorded the song was Roger Miller. So anybody remember Roger Miller? You know, trailers for sale or rent, rooms to let 50 cents. No, I forget all the words. At the time, so Roger Miller was singing about this romantic idea that was very, very popular in the 50s and 60s. It was prompted by the writings of Henry Miller and Jack Kerouac and other people of what we call the Beat Generation or the Bohemian Generation, where there was this idea that we should just be free and go wander around. And so these writers and this writing very much influenced songs like King of the Road by Roger Miller because he imagined himself to be free like a hobo and sang the song. And when he read the lyrics to this song, Bobby McGee, it was about some couple hitchhiking across the country and being free. And that really appealed to him because he knew it would appeal to America of that period of time, the 60s. Chris Christopherson also recorded this song. And how many remember Chris Christopherson? So most of you remember him from A Star is Born. He was an actor. And he was also a very prolific songwriter. And this is one of his first songs. And the thing about this song is that he imagined himself being busted flat, like totally broke, in Baton Rouge, and then hitchhiking. So he essentially sends his girlfriend out to the side of the road to flag down a semi, because if he was doing that, they wouldn't stop. So Bobby goes out, flags the diesel down, and then he runs out, and they get a ride. But it's all okay because they sing every song this driver knew. And it's this romantic idea of the freedom of the road, the freedom of actually having nothing, the freedom of being busted flat, and the romance of being totally broke and just being on the road. And then the song kind of shifts and breaks down, and Bobby is not on the road to be free. Bobby's on the road because she's looking for a home. So while one person is going away from stuff and is wanting to be independent and at liberty and free, the other person feels a lack, feels enslaved, feels that they don't have anything. They don't have anything but freedom. And so when different singers sing, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, you can see that the different singers have changed the lyrics of this song to fit their understanding. Freedom, it ain't nothing, but at least it's free. Freedom ain't nothing, but it's free. Freedom ain't worth a thing, but they all changed the lyrics to fit their own ideas and their own station in life and their own independence ideas, their own freedom ideas. Christopherson had a very different idea of independence and freedom, and so we think of him as he was one of the when we talk about Waylon and Willie and the boys, he was one of the boys, along with Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison and a whole bunch of others that were like the outlaws of country rock blues at the time, right? And so now they seem like the old guys in the foundation of like American blues music. But when he wrote this song, he wrote it on an oil derrick in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And he wrote it when he was not busted flat, but he was a fairly highly paid helicopter pilot. So he would fly from Nashville to Baton Rouge. He would write a few songs while he was on the oil derrick, and then he would pick up people and he would fly back, and then he would fly back to Nashville, and that's how he made his living, and then he would try to sell songs. It's said that he got his big break when he took his helicopter and landed it on Johnny Cash's front lawn. So Johnny Cash tells this story and has sort of embellished it over the years. But it is a true story. But it also illustrates that Chris Christopherson's idea of being busted flat was not really based on his experience. He had grown up in a military family. They moved a lot. He himself entered college when he was like 17, and he was published by The Atlantic by the time he was 18 or 19. He was an Oxford Rhodes Scholar. He was featured in Sports Illustrated as one of the greatest athletes in America in college, and it was a world-class rugby player. He was being recruited by USC as a football player and was offered a position at West Point because he was a Ranger, trained helicopter pilot, and he was also an Oxford scholar, and he played for England in the rugby as a rugby hero. He'd had several hits in Europe and here by the time he came to Nashville. My point is that Chris was not a poor guy busted flat in Baton Rouge writing about his life being a hobo on the road. Roger Miller, another military brat, also did not have the freedom of immense poverty that maybe you or I have experienced. So like when I say busted flat, that means not only do I not have any money in my pocket, that means all I have is debt. I have no savings, I have nowhere to go, I am homeless, I'm whatever the thing is. My feeling of that is not freedom. While people who come from more privileged or affluent places might see that differently. So back in the 60s, when this song first came out, it was really thought more of as an upbeat, sort of a rock and roll thing. And Roger Miller, because he was so smooth, sang it more like, more like Bing Crosby, if any of you remember Bing Crosby. But he crooned the song. But most of us know this song because 2 days before she died, Janis Joplin recorded this song. She recorded this song when she was actually busted flat, when she was at the lowest point in her life, and she would die of a drug overdose only a couple days after recording this song. I believe she recorded it in her hotel room. And they have recently released this song without any of the orchestration, just her and her guitar. And so she was taught this song just days before and was not really considering recording it for putting it out. But Bob Newirth, I don't know if you guys know Bebe Newirth, it was her father, and Chris Christopherson taught her this song. And so she recorded it by herself at the lowest point in her life, and she would die of a drug overdose just a few days later. But when you listen to her singing this song, and she sings, "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose," it's heartbreaking. It's totally different than these other guys are singing this song. And she sings the song the way it was written. She doesn't change the words. And so here's 3, 4, 5 different people who all have a different understanding of the song. If you look at the song sheet lyrics, you'll see that Chris Christopherson wrote it with a guy named Fred Foster. Well, Fred didn't actually write the song. He just said, to Chris Christopherson, "Boy, I need you to write a song for my secretary, Barbara McGee." And so I just want her to be in the title, and that's my present to her, is I want you to write a song for her. So he went away and he wrote this song that had nothing to do with the secretary, nothing to do with Fred Foster, nothing to do anything, but he got paid to write a song, and then it became a hit. But nobody remembers who Bobby McGee really is. In fact, most people don't know if Bobby is a man or a woman, and because Bobby can be either way, everybody just sort of assumes that if you're a guy, you must be singing about a girl, and if you're a girl, you must be singing about a guy. But Katie Lang sings this song, and well, we don't know what Katie's singing about, but the idea of it is that here is this couple that have two different ideas, two different understandings of being on the road, of being free, of being broke. And the songwriter, the narrator, who we never get his name, his idea is different than his girlfriend or her boyfriend. What words mean to us, what our understanding is of those words, is as individual as we are. And so today, as we sort of celebrate the uniqueness and the freedoms and the liberties and the independence of our country, I want us to think about, for the whole month, what this word means to us. What does it mean to other people? What is the history of our freedom? What is the history of our independence? If you feel yourself to be free, and you know that there are still those around you who don't experience or understand freedom in the same way that you do, are you free? Are we independent? What do we mean when we say we're independent? Because surely the men who founded this country may not have wanted to be dependent on King George. But in their list of grievances in 1776, that when they signed that, what they signed was the final draft of many, 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 many letters written by many people in all sorts of collaborations by colonies and colonialists that all had different ideas about what independence was and why they were doing this and why they were ready to give up their citizenship to Britain in order to be independent and free. So if you read some of the drafts of the original Declaration of Independence, you'll see that the southern colonies added something that the northern colonies did not want there. And it had been brewing for a couple of years now, because King George had recently married Catherine of Augsburg, and she was the queen now. Now, Catherine of Augsburg was from the Habsburg family, and she was royalty, but she was also Spanish royalty. And by Spanish royalty, it meant that her ancestors came from the Iberian Peninsula of Spain. And Catherine of Augsburg was a mulatto. And a mulatto was a black person who had converted to Islam and then became mixed with the general population. So if you go to the Iberian Peninsula, you will find Moroccans and Africans and Gypsies and Gitane and Roma and German people, and all mixed together. And when Spain was a Muslim country, those were mulattoes, mula ata, which means they have given themselves to Allah. Now, we say mulatto to mean half white, half black, but that's not the real use of that term. So when Harry marries Meghan, it is Meghan who is of mixed race that is not a mulatto, and Harry, who appears to be the whitest guy on the block, he is actually, as a descendant of Catherine of Augsburg, a mulatto. See, our understanding of words are based upon the context and the history, and the more you know, the more you realize that history is fluid, history is hidden, and with it are words. Words like these words here have power. But they only have power of what we give to them. And the more we understand, the more we know, the more power they actually have. Partially because the more universal our understandings are, the more we understand what other people understand, the more we understand the word understand. Because in the English way, when we say, I understand, that means that I stand under the accepted belief, the one that the king who speaks to God gave me, the one that the Pope gave me. I stand under their definition. Now, in the Germanic Protestant sense, you say, like, I'm a Dutch speaker, and in Dutch and in German, and here where we are, we don't say understand, we say verstand. Verstand means I butt up against, I confront. And so understanding means to become face to face with what your belief is. So while I get what you're saying, I don't necessarily have to believe it. Our idea of understanding very often means the acceptance of one truth. I want to take this month to understand understanding differently, in a way that makes us all more compassionate, more open, more, I think of it as idealistic about what things mean. And today, I want us to start with our own freedom and think about how lucky we are, how privileged we are, and use this day to understand that everybody's understanding of independence, of freedom, of liberty, and of being an American is different. And that can mean whatever it means to you as we move forward in this month, in this year, and in our lives. Namaste. Thank you so much.